Hi, yes, Philly. Mr. Rogers here with part two of my lectures on late 19th and early 20th century world and European history to set you up so that you can understand how that world was led into World War I. The first part of this lecture series looked at the first of five key themes of this period, which were industrial capitalism and the new imperialism. This part will take us through the remaining three themes: nationalism, militarism, and imperial alliances. So let's jump right into it with a look at nationalism. So what is a nation? The basic definition of a nation is that it is a large group of people united by common descent, history, culture, or language, inhabiting a particular territory. What is nationalism? Well, the nationalism just is taking that into a movement. The basic definition of nationalism is that it is a political, social, and economic system for promoting the interests of a particular nation with the aim of gaining and maintaining their own independence from other nations. Whew, that's very complicated. But put it a bit more simply, a nation is a large group of people who feel united by a common descent. That could be religion, that could be language, that could be that they're from the same region. So nationalism could be as big as the United States or France or Ghana or South Africa or China, and it could be as small as Philadelphia or the Eagles Nation. Nationalism can be huge, span whole continents, or it could be as small as a city or in some cases even a neighborhood. Nationalism is taking that idea of people being united by that common descent, that common history, that common culture and language, and puts it into a movement. Nationalism is about promoting the interests of that nation with the goal of gaining their own control of their own destiny. So nationalism is the goal of nationalism is to make the nation a felt force, something that can do something, whether it's control of a country, whether it's control of a territory, whether it's control over just the future of that group of people in that particular place. So now, again, nationalism can stretch from a whole big country like France or China or the United States to a smaller group of people like a city like Philadelphia or New York, or it could be a group of people. Black nationalism is a form of nationalism. It takes people of a common descent, people of African descent who have the experiences of being people of African descent, African American culture, African American language, that unites them and they're a nation. And black nationalism, promoted by figures like Malcolm X, is a nationalism as much as French nationalism, as much as American nationalism, as much as Chinese nationalism, as much as Ghanaian nationalism. So nationalism is a diverse concept. So how did it work in the actual 19th century, though? All right, so most simply, nationalism is the drive by people to be ruled by people who look like them, act like them, speak like them. Now, this nationalism has a positive side. People striving for independence from foreign control. And there's lots of countries: India, Brazil, Kenya, Ghana, Mexico, Japan. These are all countries that have thrown off foreign oppressors and have gained their own independence and their own control of themselves. However, nationalism also has a negative side. And that negative side is people thinking that their nation is superior to others. And that nationalism, that racist nationalism, is one of the things that led to the new imperialism. Brits, the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the Dutch, the Germans, they all believed that they were superior to Indians, to the Ghanaians, to Kenyans, to Chinese people, to Mexicans. They viewed themselves as superior to other people. They believed that their nation made them superior to other people. It wasn't just about controlling their own future, about being ruled by people who look like them, act like them, talk like them. It was saying, no. How we look, how we act, how we speak is the best way to live your lives. So again, nationalism does have a positive side. Nationalism powered the struggle for South African independence and the control of black Africans in South Africa to control the fate of their country. Same with the Congo, same with Ghana, same with China, same with India. These were all positive nationalisms of overthrowing foreign control. But there's also a negative side that this kind of way of thinking can lead people to racism and imperialism. And, France thinking that it was better than all other countries in the world. Britain viewing it as better than all other countries in the world. The United States viewing itself as better than all other countries in the world, and that it has the right, because it's better than anyone else, to control the world's future. So the 19th century, again, how this played out in the 19th century was in many ways the great age of nationalism. Many nations, particularly in Europe and Americas, which had never had their own country, gained one between 1800 and 1914. This is Brazil, Germany, Panama. These are all countries that were created in this time period, where people who never had their own independent country were able to get one. There had not been a united Germany, for example, in recent history, and it was created in this period. Panama, same. Brazil overthrew Portuguese control in this period of time and became an independent country. The same is true for Mexico and lots of Central American and Latin American countries. And nationalism also overswept long-standing countries and strengthened their own sense of superiority. So countries like Great Britain, the United States, Japan, France, they all began to view themselves as superior to other people. They began to develop, again, their own sense of who they were in contrast to other countries, other peoples, and that led to a sense of superiority. So on one hand, we see nationalism creating freedom for people to be ruled by their own themselves, by people, again, who, as I said earlier, who looked like them, spoke the same language as them, shared some of the same interests as them, in places like Brazil, in places like Panama, in places like Mexico. But at the same time, we also see a nationalism that's causing countries to view themselves as superior to others, developing in Great Britain, the United States, Japan, France, that is going to lead to them, of course, feeling that because they're superior, they should control the fate of the world. So nationalism and imperialism have a two-sided relationship. Nationalism inspired many people to believe that their nation was better than all others because they deserved to rule over inferior nations. The biggest example of this is, of course, the country that has the largest world empire, which is Great Britain, but there's also France, there's also Germany, there's also our own country, the United States. All fell into that form of nationalism that inspired people to believe that their nation was better than all others because they deserved to rule over inferior nations. Inferior, of course, in scare quotes. At the same time, there's another nationalist reaction to imperialism, which is people who were colonized, who were taken over by countries like Great Britain, countries like the United States, began to be inspired by their own nationalism. So the fact that Britain took over India, for example, led to a lot of the creation of Indian nationalism, where Indian people said, no, we don't want to be ruled by these English-speaking white people. We want to be ruled by people who speak our language, who look like us, who have our history, not these outsiders. So nationalism has, again, this two-sided relationship with imperialism. On one hand, it inspired people to become imperialists, to take over other countries. And on the other hand, it inspired people to resist being conquered by other countries. So on one hand, nationalism drove people to want freedom for their own people, but also drove them to want to control other peoples. So there's this two-sided relationship between nationalism and imperialism. That's really important to understand. All right, so this brings us to our fourth theme, which is militarism, which is in many ways linked to, again, imperialism and linked to nationalism. Because what industrial capitalism, imperialism, and nationalism did was it drove a massive expansion of military power and war throughout the 19th century. The first place that technological advances were applied was the art of killing people. Machine guns, airplanes, bombers, fighters, chemical weapons were all invented with the technology that was developed in the late 19th century. And for imperialism to work, it led to a massive expansion of the military imperial countries. You can't conquer other countries without a military. But of course, nationalism also required wars of independence. So countries that wanted to throw off their European oppressors or their American oppressors needed military technology to do so. So at all levels, militarism was seeping through society, from imperialist countries to imperialized countries. Everyone was being pushed in this militaristic direction. By the end of the 19th century, the most powerful countries in the world, France, Great Britain, Russia, Germany, were locked in this arms race, as you can see in this picture here on the right side of the slide. All right, to see who could have the biggest military. They were also competing with one another for who could have the largest empire. And minor wars would break out between each of them to see who could control what part of the world. But this arms race between these countries is really important. It leads to massive expansion of military across all sides. And everybody was engaged in a game of chicken, where they were afraid, they didn't want to be the first country to blink, to stop cranking up the military expansion, because they were afraid they would fall behind and lose out to the other countries, or perhaps even be conquered by one of the other countries. In fact, by the beginning of World War I, the world was more heavily armed and capable of destruction than any other point in human history up to then. And it was clear to many people, both before the war and after the war, that a major war between any of the major imperialist powers could become massively deadly very fast, because you have powerful countries with massive militaries and massive destructive capabilities, new technologies, gas, deadly poisonous gas that we'll learn about when we talk about World War I. More powerful bombs than ever before. Machine guns, which allowed people to just gun down other human beings with a speed that had never really been seen before in human history. People are more capable of destroying one another than any other time in human history. And we're going to see that when we get into World War I. And this brings us to the final key theme of this period, and the thing that's going to most directly lead into the beginning of World War I. And that is imperial alliances. Due to that arms race that I talked about earlier and that massive expansion of imperialism, the European powers began to seek alliances with one another. They wanted to protect their empires and maintain what they called the balance of power, which meant that no other empire was more powerful than another. So that France was no more powerful than Great Britain, Germany was no more powerful than Russia, Russia was no more powerful than Great Britain, and so on and so on and so on. They wanted to be balanced against one another so that no one had the upper hand, and thus no one could take anything from the other person or other nation, or would lose out to another nation. These alliances were, in many ways, a form of CYA, covering your own ass. Because by making alliances, European countries believed that they could prevent a war by making it undesirable for one power to declare war on another, because it would bring everyone into conflict. So by making an alliance with another country, you weren't just fighting whoever declared war on you, wasn't just fighting you, they were also fighting another country, which was allied with a different country, which was allied with a different country, and it would just spiral. So it wouldn't just be a war between Great Britain and Germany, but it'd be a war between Great Britain, France, Germany, Russia, Italy, Spain, the United States, Norway, China, every country. They would all be involved in the war. So people believed that these alliances would prevent war because no one would want to fight a war against everybody. And we'll see that that is not the case when we get to World War I. And this basically breaks the European nations into two allied groups. There's the Triple Entente, which is on the left side of your screen, and that's France, Great Britain, and Russia. And then there's the Triple Alliance, which is Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. So these are the two key alliance groups. Each has three countries. Again, the Triple Entente has France, Great Britain, and Russia. And the Triple Alliance has Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. These alliances are, again, designed The Triple Entente believed by creating their alliance, they would prevent war with the Triple Alliance because the Triple Alliance doesn't want to fight a war against all three of these countries. The Triple Alliance felt the same. Germany allied with Austria and Italy because they believed that Great Britain wouldn't want to fight Germany, Austria, and Italy. And Italy didn't believe that Russia would want to fight Germany and Austria. France believed that Germany wouldn't want to fight Great Britain and Russia. So again, all of these alliances they're viewed as a preventive measure. Now, as we'll see, they weren't a preventive measure. In fact, actually, these alliances made the war worse. And we'll get to that in the next lecture series that I'll have, which is about the beginning of World War I. But taking all of this together, World War I had 4 main causes, and main is also an acronym. All right, the first was militarism. The second was alliances. The third was imperialism, and the fourth was nationalism. So if we take all of this that I've talked about over these 2 parts of this lecture series, we talked about industrial capitalism, we talked about the new imperialism, we talked about nationalism, we talked about militarism, we talked about these entangling alliances. That, again, boils down to 4 main causes of World War I: militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. So now that we've gone over all this material, we've provided the context necessary to know why World War I broke out, we can turn our attention to the direct causes of the war, which will be my next series of videos, my next series of lectures. I really want to thank all ES Philly students who listen to all this. Please make sure that you check this lecture against your study questions. You can find, if you don't know where part 1 is, you can find part 1 in the description of this video. You'll also find links to the study questions that you need to do in that description as well. Take care, everyone, and stay safe.